Look, on Leadership Now, I promised never to do commercials, but here we are. Why? Well, I have a new book in the works. It's coming out spring 2026, and I wanted to give you an advance heads up about it. The title, The Future of Work is Gray, and it's kind of a big deal to me because the book dives into the age crisis that's reshaping work as we know it. It's something that I call age debt, but spoiler alert, it does turn into some solution. There's some hope, there's some positive, and that's called the experience dividend. So if your workplace still thinks that age is a liability, well, it's time to retire that mindset. In fact, we might want to retire the word retire. So yeah, I don't do ads. This is a special occasion, and for it, I am willing to go gray. And maybe Grey Goose will sponsor me, not sure. Anyway, spring 2026, the future of work is gray. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Leadership Now with me, Daniel Pontifrac. Today in the house, Leanne Clark-Shirley, PhD. Leanne, so great to see you again. I feel like we're friends. Short bio, and then we'll get right into a conversation about aging. So Leanne is president and CEO of the American Society on Aging, aka ASA, the nation's largest multidisciplinary association of professionals working in aging. Leanne is a social gerontologist dedicated to building a society in which all of us have a full and fair chance at a good long life. She brings 20 plus years of experience working in aging-related nonprofit consulting and academic environments. Before joining ASA, she was AARP's, sometimes called AARP, AARP's Senior Evaluation Advisor responsible for strategic planning, building internal evaluation research capacity, and applying impact measurement expertise at the departmental and enterprise levels. Prior to that, she led the aging and disability research practice at IMPAQ, Impact International, a think tank and policy research firm. Leanne is a fellow of the Gerontological Society of America, teaches courses on policy and aging, and regularly mentors students interested in non-academic careers in aging. She received her doctorate in gerontology from the University of Maryland in Baltimore County. Leanne, so great for you to spend a little bit of time with me, and for listeners and viewers, what a pedigree. I think what we want to do first, though, is sort of help people understand you and ASA. So tell us a bit about ASA, and then kind of what it's all about and why you're there.
Yeah. So thank you. It's great to be here with you. Always delighted to talk with you, and excited for your new book that's coming out next year. So ASA, as you said, we are the largest multidisciplinary professional home, I call it, for everyone that cares about aging in some way. We're 71 years old. Just had a big 70th last year, which was great. And our members consist of folks from what you might think of as traditional aging services, people running nutrition sites, running home delivered meals. We also have academics, we have advocates, we have tech startups, entrepreneurs, marketing professionals. We've even had some interior design folks join ASA's members. The tie that binds is really all about doing whatever we can in our own sectors to make sure everyone's got that full and fair chance at living a good, long life.
So you've got well over, 5,000 members across the country? What's the number? Yeah. Something like that? Yeah. So the other thing, of course, is just demographic data that stares us in the face almost each and every day. And so we are inching rather closely by the year 2030, roughly speaking, in North America, 1 in 5 citizens are going to be over the age of 65. So to me, you're in an organization that's sort of now really setting the tone for how we in society should be addressing the fact that we're aging, like society is definitively getting older. So tell us a bit about sort of what ASA is helping people understand. Is it not, it's not just communications. There's perhaps other behavior changes or attributes we should be thinking about. So tell us a bit about some of the things that you're doing to help us understand and prepare for a much older society.
Yeah. My other favorite statistic is, this is already true for, I think, 12 states in the US. and will be true nationally in the US in just a couple of years. There will be more people over 60 than children under
Oof.
18 for the first time in history. I mean, this is the mega trend of our moment. I think that's
Yeah.
a good and authentic way to say it. And at ASA, one of our core pillars is really helping flip the script on how we think about, work in, navigate, and serve aging. Frankly, it's been this, you know, kind of a topic that has been taboo, that people don't want to talk about, that people are afraid of, people feel ashamed to talk about, people make jokes about getting older.
Mm.
And we sort of have this view that aging is just about decline and loss. And so at ASA, we are all about bringing our members together, not only to provide better, more innovative products, services, technologies to support us as we do experience losses and as our bodies and minds change, but also open up new pathways to start a new venture when you're in your 60s or 70s, to learn something new, to have the confidence to go out and connect with people of different ages. This is not just about what we lose, but it's about what we gain in creating opportunities where we've built so many artificial barriers based on the number of candles on our birthday cake. So we're trying to change that.
Well, you've got a fan in me. One of the things that clearly that I'm sure you see is that there are kind of trigger words like aging or older or elder, et cetera. So instead of like those anxiety triggers, how do we shift to optimism? So I loved your point where, starting a new venture. I mean, we can see in data that Americans 65 and up in 2023 earned 7% of all wages, which in 1987 or 85 was like at 2%. So you
Yeah.
can see the data that it's actually happening. But what is it, some of the things that we should be looking out for in terms of the narrative as
Mm-hmm.
society is aging?
Yeah, another interesting stat, older entrepreneurs are some of the most successful. By age, the older you are, the more likely it is that your startup will succeed, which is really interesting.
Mm.
And I think that's it. What we need to be watching out for is these assumptions that we make about ourselves and about other people, and assumptions that other people make about us when we are perceived as old. You mentioned, trigger words. Elderly is probably the most common offender, let's say. And, at ASA, we talk about alternatives to using the word elderly, but it's not just to replace a word that might not sound nice. There's reason and merit behind there. When we use singular words like elderly that have such a heavy connotation of dependency and decline, and sure, that happens, and so, happens to all of us in some ways as we
Yeah.
grow older. Using one word to describe a group of people, and that word has such a negative connotation, that really just misses the truth. It misses the reality. And so if we get rid of elderly, not just for the sake of getting rid of the word, but what we put in its place should help us understand the really enormous diversity that
Mm.
exists in the segments of our population that are growing older. We bring lifetimes of experiences, exposures, desires, wants, needs. We bring all of that with us as we age. And so it's preposterous to think that just because, the 65 plus, the 50 plus, that is the most unique, diverse group of people on the planet. And these words just get in our way.
It's really shameful, right? I mean, if we put in some social science terminology, right? Like we both, you and I had a lot of fluid intelligence when we were younger. You get a little bit older, wiser, and that turns into crystallized intelligence. And of course, people who have been through the career tracks and the life tracks are oozing with that sort of crystallized wisdom that can be passed on. So my next question for you is the if the segment that's growing the fastest is the older segment of the human population, America,
Yeah.
otherwise, quite frankly, why is it that executives, leaders, general organizational thinking is that they might value experience Yet a lot of the systems or the systemic behavior is that youth is all. And I'm just like, something's not clicking for me. And I'm sure you've got a comment or two on what we might be doing differently in our
Yeah.
orgs.
Yeah. Well, it it is a puzzle. And I do want to acknowledge, I think things are changing. I am seeing
Good.
signs of change, even as recently, as the past 5 years. Um, I think what gets in our way is this tendency to equate aging with our health.
Uh,
Um, and so when we talk about, I don't know, older workers or the aging workforce, there comes with it just some baked in assumptions, some baked in feelings, even some baked in stereotypes that we're going to be dealing with frail, sick, healthcare costly employees, for
mm,
instance. And I don't even know that we realize we're making those, assumptions when we're talking about those groups. But there's a lot of evidence that shows that, what we call sort of ageism, words, ageist beliefs, ageist practices that we may or may not be aware of that sort of discriminate people based on their chronological age. Um, I think those are getting in our way. And so what I see happening, CEOs are hanging around longer. Board members tend to be older than, senior leadership teams, even. So there are places where older people are showing up and are contributing and are wildly smart, bringing new innovative ideas. And because the demographic change is what it is, there's more of those examples in the boardroom, at work, in
mm.
our community center, at church. There's just more exposure to the realities of aging, which is that it's a wildly different, diverse experience. And there's people with all kinds of talents and interests and needs and wants. And that's okay because we're all just humans.
It feels a bit, however, that there's some invisible nature thing going on here, right? So
Yeah.
you in your parks, at your church, at the shopping malls, right on the street, you still see strollers and babies and young kids, etc. Then you see middle age, you see older folks, right? It doesn't really, you don't really see it until you look at data. And when you look at the data, then all of a sudden it tells a whole different picture. So, how do you help, whether it was at AARP or with ASA, how do we help people see that it's a natural thing? We are aging, society is aging. I'm just curious, like how what do we need to learn from you and ASA to change our minds that it's you don't have to just look at data. There are things you can be doing to support, this evolution that we're actually going through demographically.
Yeah, I like to offer two suggestions to people. One is just to take a day, just pick a day and decide that that is the day that you are going to notice how aging shows up in your interactions, in the TV that you
Ah,
watch and what you read. You just pick a day and just simply notice and observe. Be highly attuned, to age, the people that you see, the people that you talk to. What do their ages look like in relation to yours? And then just spend a little time thinking about what you observed. Maybe you see a ton of people of different ages from you everywhere, and you might think, wow, age is not really getting in the way. I'm seeing all kinds of ages here. Or you might say, you know what? I'm only seeing people that are younger than me or people my age. What's up with that?
mm.
And it could be any host of factors, but noticing it is a starting point, and then kind of taking some time to process what you're observing. The second thing I like to tell people is go out and intentionally make a friend of a different age,
Oh, I
whether
love it.
that's at work, whether it's on the internet, whatever. Actively seek out someone 20 years your junior or senior and strike up a conversation and see what happens. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I firmly believe this. Nothing magic happens to us when we turn 50 or 65 or 85. Nothing magic happens. But we assume that it does, sort of at a societal level. And when you just start relating to people as humans, the mystifying qualities of age can sometimes go away or reveal themselves to be kind of magical.
Those are two very practical and wise pieces of advice. And I think it also reminds me whether people like sports, and if you do like a sport, whether it's baseball or football, often, championship teams go out and seek those older, mature, wise veterans, as sometimes they're called, to help complement, that final roster, that final team sheet, because there's then the exchange of that mentorship from I've been through this before, here's what it's like in the playoffs, to have you tried this before? And the older wise veteran, right, saying, oh, yeah, I guess I can get to first base quicker using that strategy or what have you. Is that
Yeah.
something akin to what you're kind of thinking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think so. And I'm a big fan of live music.
Oh, yeah.
I was at a concert just last night, actually, and I looked around, and at any given time, I was seeing people, a lot of people my age, but I was seeing a couple, very young people in the audience, some as young as, small children with those big headphones on. They're very
Yeah,
cute with those listening to music. But, I saw a lot of people that were 20, 30 years older than me. There was a 71-year-old that I talked to in line. And age was the last thing on our minds. We were talking about the singles that we liked, the guitar playing, you were just connecting. And so, yeah, it could be as intentional as seeking out perspectives that are different than yours based on wisdom. It could be as simple as just dropping age altogether and taking a look at who's around you and finding someone interesting to talk to and learn from that might have a different perspective than yours.
I love that. And it just reminded me, last weekend, I was in Montreal visiting my 18-year-old in her first year of university, and I flew in my 22-year-old from a city nearby in Halifax.
Oh,
And we
fun.
all went to see this concert with a band from England called Wet Leg, 25, 28-year-old
Yes.
band. And so here we are rocking out. I'm the 54-year-old, but there were 70-year-olds there too. There were
Yes,
30-year-olds and 18. I was like a magic moment. I was like, the two kids are looking at me like, Dad, this is like your book. This is what you're talking about, aren't you? I'm like, yes, well, like,
exactly.
it's
You
amazing.
know, yeah. And if you take a, to your point earlier, you read the data, but really it's all around us. We just need to just kind of take a step back and take the chance to observe it.
All right, so not as fun as White Legger concerts, but government. What place does government federally, provincially, state-wise, municipal, like what is it that I think elected officials and bureaucrats can help us with in this journey that you're under?
Yeah, that is quite a departure from concerts and live music. Um, you know, so again, ASA's North Star is to do everything we can and unite our members, partners, and allies around doing what we can to make sure everyone's got a chance at a good long life.
Yeah.
I like to say longevity is the goal and aging is how we get there. So if you look at a systems level and just take a look at the what's happening federally and at state level, what programs are available to assist us, you notice that we're usually talking about bare minimums. What is the government puts things in place so that when we perhaps retire, we can still have a modicum of of income security or
Yeah.
food security, whatever it is. So we're talking like bare minimum stuff. And you can argue if that's the role of the government or not. But I think it's worth noting that the governments tend to approach aging as sort of something to support or fix or protect. Neither here nor there, but I think it's important to realize that's typically the orientation.
Hmm.
But when it comes to ensuring that the government is doing all it can to meet that bare minimum or to perhaps support better outcomes, better lives for all of us, you got to look at what they're doing for children too, because children of today are the old folks of tomorrow. And
Sure.
their experiences today, they're going to carry them through into their old age. That'll affect their health, that'll affect their ability to earn income, so on and so forth. But I think the most important thing we can do one-on-one when folks are running for any office, whether it be local, state, or federal, is just ask, what are you doing to help me have a good long life? What are you doing? And
Hmm.
just see what they say. I don't think we typically frame conversations and policy options in that way to our elected officials. But I think we should, because really there's more of us than ever before chasing that goal.
You brought up longevity, which is tangential to kind of where I want to go next. Is so how, for me as a citizen, as a human being, um, as a 54-year-old, I think I might have been thinking about this. I could have, I should say, Leanne, been thinking about the longevity factor earlier, both as a leader in organizations that was looking after culture and leadership development, but I think just even in preparation for my some call it fourth quarter, third term, whatever way you look at it. So the last third of your life or last quarter. What do you advise for whether it's a human being as a citizen or even in the organization level? What are changes that you've seen or you've implemented or recommended as people are younger, preparing to live longer?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is just singing the praises of financial planning when you are
Uh,
young and the magic of compound interest. It seems silly to talk about that, but really, that is a key driver of longevity. How secure are you financially? How stable are you financially? What access do you have? So even as something as simple as, investing in retirement accounts, but I think we've got a problem in that we're all sort of short-sighted. We're all the future and old age. We've set it up to feel like something that happens to someone else and not us. Um, and so I think part of this is just changing how we talk about older people, about aging. It's not a them conversation, it is an us
yeah.
conversation. So as an organizational leader, what am I doing to set myself up to work in a workplace that I want to work in 20 years from now? What am I doing to invest in the skills I need so that I can do what I want, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, no matter how old you are? Um, there's a lot of 85-year-olds in the workplace. They're more than ever before, so it's not ridiculous to talk about professional development, upskilling at age 50, 60. It should be part of the conversation. So it's not just when you're young.
I love it. And so, what you gave us a couple good examples of looking around and making a connection in your community as a citizen. What are some of those tips or tricks or tactics you think leaders ought to be considering, if not implementing, to sort of solve part of this riddle that you're alluding to here?
Yeah. It's worth taking a look at who's missing from leadership tables.
Ah,
And by leadership tables, this is sort of age agnostic. How do you even define a leader in the first place? What qualities do you really want? What perspectives do you really want? At ASA, we're big at saying we want to design with and not design for. We don't want, we're participatory. We want to pull people in. And I think that's good advice too for organizations and leaders. Whose voice are you missing at the table, and where can you get them? And
hmm.
certainly, age comes into play there. And it could be you're missing younger voices. It could be you're missing, the voices of working moms who are trying to get home at night and trying to do, whose voice are you missing? Bring it in. I think that's really key. And make sure you're willing to listen to what they have to say.
Hmm. Is there an opportunity too, then, for going back into the organization with your expertise for leaders, senior leaders, sort of people helping to shape culture, to maybe form better ways in which I guess people can work together, whether you call it intergenerational collaboration, inter-age collaboration, like you mentioned about how people could learn from one another, right? So someone older picking up a reverse mentor and vice versa the other way. What are other things you could see that help bridge that gap between, oh my gosh, Dan is old, to, oh my gosh, what a young punk you are at 18?
Yeah. I was having a conversation about this the other day. I actually think, it's interesting how few resources we give younger people who need
Huh.
to manage up to older colleagues. It can
Hmm.
be awkward where, as much let's call it ageism as exists, and there's a lot of it. But there's also this innate, we're taught to sort of respect our elders. And so when we're in management positions, if someone that we are managing is older than us, that can create awkward conversations. And there's really no resources that I'm aware. If you know of any, I would love to see them. But even looking at how we are talking with younger people managers, younger people developers, and just figuring out what assumptions and beliefs they may be holding on to about the older people that they work with. In my experience, most older people have no problem and are really excited to work with people younger and older than them. But I think we can do more for
Well,
the younger layers.
do you think that ageism, therefore, is the last of the isms that we really haven't tackled? Or is that sort of more foolish
That
to consider?
Yeah, that gets thrown about, and there have been times when I have said that, and it's not that I don't believe it. Um, I just don't think that we've attended to the other isms in a way that makes us able to say this is the last one. It sort of implies that the rest are fixed, and I just
Gotcha.
don't believe that's
Yeah.
true.
Got
But
it.
it's an important one. But you know what? It intersects with so many other, we're not just our age, we're also so many other social characteristics, be that religion, be that sexual identity, be that gender, whatever. So it's really important to look at the intersections of all of those things. Anytime, if your company has an initiative to close the gender wage gap, for instance, there's a room to insert aging into that
Yeah.
concept. If you're trying to help your employees who are caring for children, there's room to bring aging into that. There's room to bring aging into every single conversation we're having, and I think that's a good place to start too.
One of those attributes might be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Leanne, we have a dialogue about this too, is sort of the tropes that find their way into the generations categories or classifications. So whether it's what was it, Hey Boomer or something like that,
Yeah.
or
Okay, boomer.
yeah, okay Boomer, or moody Gen X or Nirvana bashing
Yeah.
dude like me. Tell me how sometimes, although in jest or kind of in humor, it might be used. If we're using them as tropes, almost in a negative sense, it's culture killing or culture stalling. Tell us a bit about what you suggest we should be thinking about when it comes to generations, either in the workforce or just in society in general.
Yeah, that's another kind of hot debate in my world, whether generational assumptions have merit. And I think I would argue it depends. And sometimes they do, sometimes they do not. Um, at the risk of getting too wonky, I want to introduce a term that in academic gerontology, which probably everybody's like, academic gerontology, what is even that? But
It's you.
um, yeah, it's me, the study of aging, and that's
Yeah.
very broad and diverse. But we talk about something called the age period cohort effect. And I
Okay.
think it's an academic concept, but it's really helpful in understanding when thinking in generational terms, so to speak, can be helpful.
Okay.
It's this when you're trying to understand how aging is related to some concept or problem or experience. Age effects are individual level things that happen to us over time, developmentally, when as we get older, we move into adulthood, later adulthood, our risk for diseases increases, for
Right.
instance. That's age effects. Period effects are things that happen to all of us, to the entirety of society at the same point in time. The pandemic is a great example. 9/11 is another example. The invention of AI is a really good example of a period effect. It's happening to all of us. We're all exposed to it. And so our relationship to AI as a society is much different today than it was 50 years ago when we were reading Ray Bradbury books. But cohort effects then are, the stage of life that we're in when those period effects happen to us. And so I do think it is reasonable to talk about in the workplace, the innate exposure that younger generations have had to different forms of technology compared to older generations. It's not good or bad. One's not better or worse than the other. But I do think, you know, if you encounter technology for the first time when you're 5 years old, like my godchildren, I mean, I encountered the internet when I was 20. And so my godson is going to have 15 years on me, just in terms of exposure to the internet. And so his knowledge will be wildly different. So it has to do with where we are in life when these major disruptors happen. And I think there is some merit
Mm.
in looking at behaviors, attitudes, from a generational lens in that context. But where we go wrong is when we just make sweeping assumptions that, all moody Gen X Nirvana listeners like myself were just, didn't want to raise their hand, didn't want to do the work. That's when things go wrong, when you make these blanket sweeping statements disconnected from the concept and the environment that concept is happening in.
Well, I'm sure you'd agree. We all just have to come as you are, Leanne.
Well
You knew,
done.
you knew that was coming. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Well, what I love about affect and cohort is that when I think about, me and my kids, just using academic gerontological language here for a second.
Yeah.
So the period, of course, was COVID. My mid to late 2000s born children experienced the effect of COVID in a way that was far different than me. They were trying to receive learning and to continue to apply the skills of developing their own academic level, grades 8, 10, 11, I think it was. And here I am trying to deliver keynotes and workshops over
Yeah.
virtual sessions for my clients and retainers, et cetera. That is a much different effect or a cohort effect that
Yes.
I have than what they had in the same period of which we experienced for whatever 2 years, COVID lockdowns, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right on. And your life will be shaped differently than the life of your children because of where you were in your lives when you were
Mm-hmm.
experiencing that. Yeah, that's right.
And the result, I suppose, for leaders to be thinking about is not if you're Boomer, Gen X, Gen Z. It is okay in the organizational workplace. What is it that you're doing to teach other leaders and even team members who don't have a team to lead appreciation of belonging, of respect, of sort of differentiation, of diversity? Because that diversity can be a cohort-based older individual who also went through COVID and then had to come back to work, and maybe now
Yeah.
they're being treated a little differently. Maybe they're experiencing it a little differently than a millennial who just was whatever. Let's do this, and not necessarily appreciating some of the effects that would have happened to that individual, older individual who didn't have a partner, didn't have a dog or a pet, was alone for whatever 6 months. Like that's a
Yeah.
really good lesson, I think, for others to think about in these periods.
Yep.
If you're following me.
Yeah, I am, and as you're talking, I'm reminded even too of social media
Hmm.
as sort of another period effect that really has changed fundamentally how people relate to each other. And the phase of life that you were in when this social media disruption came in has really done some, well, we can get into whether it's good or bad another time, but it's changed how we relate
Yeah.
to each other. And whether that's happening as you are coming of age or as you were a 55, 60, 70-year-old person, that's going to show up differently.
And if that 50 to X number aged individual is still leading teams and organizations and units
Yeah.
and isn't empathetic and respectful
Yes.
of what a younger cohort is doing to experience their now workplace because of social media, i.e., they
Yeah.
love providing feedback on TikTok about their
Yeah.
boss, about the cafeteria. It's just an open season of feedback.
Yeah.
You don't get that, i.e., if you're the older leader, then I think there's a reverse relationship that has to be set up, right? So this whole notion of
Yeah.
aging, even though you might be wise, you still have to tap into some of that fluid intelligence and sort of help yourself understand different cohorts for different periods.
Yeah, well said. Empathy has to go both ways,
Mm.
always when it comes to age-related differences, I think.
Gosh, I could certainly chat with you for hours. I think we'll have to have you back on this program at some point, Leanne. Incredible stuff. Leanne Clark-Shirley, she's the president and CEO of American Society on Aging, ASA. Leanne, where can we find out more about you and your wonderful organization?
Well, connect with me on LinkedIn, but ASA, you can find us at asaging.org. We have a conference happening this spring. We've got 3 different publications. We've got education going on all the time. It's a party. Come join it.
Can't wait. Well, the party's in the house. ASA, American Society on Aging. Leanne Clark-Shirley, she's the president and CEO, joining me today on Leadership Now. Thank you so much, Leanne. We've learned a lot. And again, we're going to have you back and dig a little deeper next time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thanks all for listening and or watching. You've been watching and listening to another episode of Leadership Now.